All right, great. So we're in here live today. Today is October 9th, 2023. The time is about 11:52 a.m. I have the live stream running on my phone. So if you want to leave a message, leave a chat. I'm here to discuss with y'all and build with y'all on this topic for today. Donations are always accepted and appreciated with much thanks from me. And I want to say all of the new subscribers on my channel. I just reached 2,100 subscribers today. So the channel is growing a lot. I want to say thank you to everybody who's been rocking with me, building with me, who finds my content interesting, informative, engaging, entertaining, whatever. I will constantly try to always be true to myself, be real to my audience, and not sugarcoat my feelings. So, and not sugarcoat my feelings. So let's get into today's live stream. This is a very hot topic right now. So we're going to tread very carefully, but we will always keep it real, keep it black, and keep it raw. Let's get into it. Every live stream, we start off with a map, keep it black, and keep it raw on this channel. So let's get into it. Every live stream, we start off with a map because unfortunately, many people in the world are uninformed about geography. They don't know basic geography. You see the videos of people going viral for not being able to point to Russia on a map or South Africa on a map. So we always start a live stream off with a map. And today we're talking about this country located in Western Asia or the Middle East, however you want to describe it. It's called Israel by some, and located in Western Asia or the Middle East, however you want to describe it. It's called Israel by some and Palestine by others. It's a relatively small country for this region that borders Egypt to the southwest, Jordan to the east and southeast, Syria to the northeast, and Lebanon to the north, with the Mediterranean Sea on its eastern coast. As you can see from the map here, this country has two large sections that are disputed. One side is called Gaza or the Gaza Strip, and this is the West Bank. Israel is a state that was created to be a homeland for the Jewish people. The Jewish people historically have been oppressed, marginalized, and run out of many countries across the world. After World War II, essentially, many Jews no longer felt comfortable living in Europe, and many began to migrate to the Middle East, to the historic homeland of the Jewish people, according to them, which is Israel, a place that was occupied by the Ottomans for many centuries. It had a large Arab Muslim majority, though there were a large number of Arab Christians there as well. Over time, essentially, the Jews or the Israelis, however you want to describe them, began to dominate the territory and gain more and more land and recognition from the international community. And the Palestinians that were originally living there, the Arab majority, Muslim majority, began to be marginalized to either the Western Bank or the Gaza Strip. Bank or the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is led by a political organization called Hamas, which is dedicated to fighting Israel for Palestinian sovereignty. And the Western Bank is controlled by an organization called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is dedicated to diplomatic or political means for Palestinian liberation. That's a general overview that I will give on the history. Before we get to the big news, though, about the war happening right now, or the conflict that is brewing right now in Israel, I want to tell a story. Long time ago, not that long ago, I would say maybe about 2.5 years ago, I was living in a country in Europe called Serbia, and I was dating around, and I met this very nice, very lovely sister right here, and we dated for a few months. We had great times together. Our relationship ended essentially when she got pregnant and she wanted to have an abortion. I begged her not to have an abortion, even though I was scared to be a father and I was not married to her or anything like that. She had an abortion, and that caused our relationship to end. Uh, the last time I saw her, she came to my apartment. We made love. Then she left, and I never spoke to her or saw her again. So that's just a brief story of my life. But why is that story important to this story about Israel and Palestine? Well, this woman that you see here on the screen was from Gaza. She was from the Gaza Strip, literally Palestinian. Many people might not assume so because she is a chocolate sister, a beautiful melanated person like I am. But she was literally from Gaza. Showed me her family living in Gaza, pictures of her brothers and cousins and father. All of them look like my cousins, brothers, and father, that sort of thing. And she spoke beautiful Arabic, some of the finest Arabic I've ever heard. And she told me about what it was like growing up in the Gaza Strip. For people that don't know, the Gaza Strip is essentially an open air prison. Israel keeps very tight control over who goes in and who comes out of Gaza. The people there basically live under permanent sanction by Israel and have limited contact with the outside world. So the people that are able to leave that situation are very special, because normally you have to get special permissions and visas just to be able to leave Gaza, right? And many countries around the world don't recognize Gaza as a legitimate country. So even though she had a Gazan passport, Palestinian passport, whatever, which she showed me, um, it doesn't work in a lot of places. Serbia, I guess, is one of the few places she could go. And her name was Riham. And Riham and I would have very, very heated debates about anti Black racism, about white supremacy, about the Israeli Palestinian conflict, and that sort of thing. And for me, being a Muslim, somebody who loves the Arab people and the Arabic language and wants to see peace for all the Muslims across the world, I was generally on the side of the Palestinians. Generally, I was saying that what's happening to her people are wrong. What's happening, what has been happening for years has been wrong. And there needs to be a solution where the Palestinians have some sovereignty and control over their situation. This was my mentality before meeting her, and still to some degree after meeting her. But when it came to talking about the Black American struggle and what we were going through in the United States, and I would tell her about how we are being treated, how the system of white supremacy affects us not only in America, but all across the world, she was very antagonistic to those ideas. She thought that Black people in the Americas were complaining too much about white supremacy and anti Blackness, even though she grew up in a system similar to apartheid in Gaza. She told me that what Black people went through is incomparable to what the Palestinians are going through. She told me that essentially that racism and white supremacy does not exist in the modern world, even though she comes from a country that is literally facing those problems. What the Israelis generally are doing to the Palestinians is no different than what happened to Black Americans and other Black people during apartheid, segregation, and the worst parts of our oppression throughout the Americas and the world. So that caused a very big rift for us, because I cannot see myself being with somebody who does not acknowledge that racism, white supremacy, anti Blackness is endemic to modern society and it needs to be stopped. And we need to be able to identify it. And I knew once and for all that she was not going to be the person that I should be with when we went to a party one time. And I'm sorry for telling this story. I feel like I'm spilling my beans, but to my therapist or something, but I'm keeping it real with y'all. So this girl was from Gaza, from, Palestinian territory. We were living in Serbia and we went to a Halloween party together. At this Halloween party, two incidents happened that always stick out in my mind. First and foremost, we were dressed up like Halloween characters. I was wearing a ghost costume. She was wearing a cat costume or something like that. We're walking through the party. We're, of course, like one of the few Black people in this very, very white space in Serbia. Maybe there were two other Black people we saw, but we were together walking through the party, and some white guy grabs her arm and says, "Goo goo gaga, blah, 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 da, 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 da," like some made up language. And her and I turn to him and say, "What did you say?" And he said, "Oh, excuse me, I thought you spoke African." And I was offended. I said, "Wow." And she said, "Ha ha 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 ha." That's somebody that I can't be around. Somebody who faces that sort of anti-black racism right in their face. The person just said, "I just said some stuff. Like I just made up some language." That's explicitly anti-black. Like if I come up to you and you speak, I don't know, Czechoslovakian or whatever, or German, and I say Schnein 9999. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't speak German? That's wildly offensive. If I go up to a Chinese person and say ching chong, right to that Chinese person, that's wildly offensive, in my opinion. She doesn't find that offensive. That's a person that is, samboing it up. You know what I mean? And then a second thing happened at this party. So I'm at the party, I'm at the bar after this guy does this racist stuff. I didn't fight the guy or anything. I just said, "Come on, let's walk away. You're wild, ignorant." And I go to the bar and I order a drink and I sit down and I'm, talking to this other guy. He's asking me, "Where am I from?" I say, "I'm from America." And he says he's from Israel. He's an Israeli Jew. And I say, "Oh, look, Riham, you finally have the opportunity to talk to somebody from your country." And she refuses to talk to him. She refuses. She says, "No, I do not want to talk to him. I don't care who he is or where he's from. I don't want to talk to him." And that showed me some of the hypocrisy right there. You can tolerate anti-black racism because maybe don't acknowledge it or you don't see it, but you can acknowledge that this person, the Israeli person, who, mind you, didn't do anything to you, didn't bother you at all, you still find a reason to discriminate against him or say that you have a stance against him. And so that showed me a lot right there about her mentality and how possibly a lot of, Arab people, black Arabs in that world think, they have to hide and diminish their blackness to build up on their Arabness and that sort of thing. Sorry for telling that story, but that's going to be the framework for me going through this dissection of what's happening in Israel and Palestine. So, for anybody tuning in, because I see people piling into the live stream now, we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian situation. I just gave the background on my former ex-girlfriend who was from Gaza, who told me a lot about her country and the culture there and that sort of thing, and why we broke up and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to get that out the way. But let's get into it. So this is a story from the New York Times. We're going to read about the situation that happened over the weekend that I'm sure you're all aware of. We're going to keep this stream very respectful, very intellectual. We're going to learn together as we read through the stories. So, there were terrorists inside. How Hamas's attack on Israel unfolded. Palestinian militants from Gaza raided Israel on Saturday, killing and abducting hundreds. Survivors have begun to recount the most complex attack on their territory in half a century. This was written on the New York Times by Patrick Kingsley, Aaron Boxerman, and Gabby Sobelman, published on October 8th, 2023. So, thousands of young Israelis have spent the night dancing at a rooftop rave. All right. Thousands of young Israelis had spent the night dancing at an outdoor rave, many clad in tie-dye t-shirts and crop tops. They ended the night in a massacre. Just after dawn on Saturday, hundreds of Palestinian militants bulldozed their way through the barricades between Gaza and Israel, drove into scores of Israeli towns along the border, and sped through the farmland where the rave was reaching its sunrise climax. The militants gunned down more than 100 ravers and abducted others, according to two senior Israeli officials, as they sprinted through the open fields. Video verified by the New York Times showed militants driving off on a motorcycle with an Israeli woman squeezed between them, screaming as her boyfriend was marched off on foot, his arm wrenched behind his back. Very troubling videos, and I'm sure some of you have seen those videos. The videos are going viral on some of the more, how can I say, gory sites of the internet. So it's not hard to find them. I will not be playing any videos on this live stream. Let me give a shout out to some people that came into the chat. EU says peace and blessings. Greg Mack says, "What up, Simon?" Shout out to EU. Shout out to Greg Mack. We're going to be building real heavy on Israel and Palestine today. So y'all stay tuned. We're going to keep this live stream very academic. I want to hear all the chats. I want to hear all of your opinions about this. We're going to be talking about, should black people care about what's happening in Israel and Palestine. If you're just now joining, we just now spoke about my ex-girlfriend who was from Gaza, what she told me about Israel, what it's like growing up there in the Gaza Strip and everything that happened there. This video is on my channel. You can go see the video that I posted. I've been open and honest about my stories from the very beginning. And shout out to Riham, wherever she is. So let's keep on building. So, those who survived often did so by hiding in nearby bushes, some of them for hours. Bullets whistled overhead and shots resounded all around, said Andre Pierre, 35, one of the survivors. He described crawling up to the top of a nearby hill to get to a better sense of what is happening. Smoke and flames and gunfire, said Mr. Pierre, a tech worker. I have a military background, but I never was in a situation like this. Here are some of the images of soldiers. I believe these are Israeli soldiers. Yes, Israeli soldiers search for remaining Hamas gunmen from Gaza in a residential neighborhood in Sderot, near where gunmen had taken over a police station. You know, in Israel, all the men are forced to go into the military. They have conscription for, I think, about 2 years. So Israel has a very advanced military force, and they also have a very advanced defense system. Well, what they call a defense system, as they keep people locked up in an open air prison in Gaza, and also in somewhat uh, under control in the West Bank, under strict monitoring and that sort of thing. People can't just leave the West Bank as they please and that sort of thing. So this attack came as a surprise to everybody, at least across the world, because we've all heard of the Iron Dome. Israel has this defense system where they can just, shoot down a rock before it falls down on the ground before you. When you throw it over the fence and that sort of thing. So this is very surprising to everybody. And depending on who you are, you might be saying this is horrible or this is heroic, depending on who you are. So began one of the bloodiest weekends in Israel and Palestinian history, the full details of which started to emerge on Sunday as survivors recounted the most complex and brazen attack on their nation since the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. About 700 Israelis were killed and at least 150 taken hostage by Palestinian militants, according to a preliminary assessment shared by a senior Israeli military official. Videos circulated of children and grandparents abducted from their homes in Israel and roadsides strewn with dead bodies. A National Security Council spokesperson said later Sunday that several American citizens had been killed in the fighting. Yeah, I don't think why that matters, because America doesn't care about their citizens abroad. I'm pretty sure I'm filming this video in Hungary right now. If I were killed in Budapest, nobody would care from the U.S. government, because that's how our government gets down. Anyway, this is quite a large number of people, 700 Israelis. But we always have to remember, we hear the news reports almost weekly, every time. Palestinian child shot in Nablus. 20 Palestinians gunned down by Israeli forces in the West Bank or in Gaza. We hear about this all the time. All the time. And this doesn't get this major coverage. Malcolm X said the media will have you thinking that the oppressors are the victims and the victims are the oppressors. Now, I'm not saying that killing innocent people or abducting children or women is okay or cool, but we have to remember, where's this same outrage or the way these articles are written, usually when the victims are Palestinian? Let's keep that in mind. So, the assault, staggering in its scale, prompted a fierce counterattack from Israel that has killed at least 413 Gazans in missile strikes and gun battles, according to Gazan health officials. My God. See, the numbers are always off, always off, man, because these numbers are going up. I'm sure if I check the count right now, it's like thousands of people on both sides have been kidnapped or killed or shot and that sort of thing. And that's horrible. The violence began familiarly. I cannot pronounce this word for the life of me. The violence began um, familiarly enough with rocket fire from Gaza just after dawn. Y'all don't roast me for that. Amir Tibon and his neighbors in kibbutz Nahal Oz, a village that stands a few hundred yards from Gaza, have become accustomed to frequent rocket fire from militants. So here's a woman, I believe she's a crying Israeli woman. Tali Toito was overwhelmed with emotion at her home in Sderot on Sunday as she described how Hamas gunmen attacked and took over the police station on her street and the gunfight that followed. Here is the person here. And we always have to remember, when we watch these stories or read these stories about wars happening, whether they be in Ukraine, whether they be in parts of Africa, whether they be in Israel or Palestine. Normal people are the ones who suffer from the political class or the people in power who dictate what the world should be like. Fighting over land, fighting over territory, fighting over national boundaries, to me is all dumb. This is why I'm against nationalism at its core, because the idea is that people should be separated by imaginary lines and borders, and regular people suffer because of this belief that we all seem to share. I'll continue reading. Bomb shelters are installed in every home in the kibbutz, and residents are used to rushing inside them every few weeks. For those that don't know, a kibbutz is like a Jewish community house. It's like where everybody lives, works, and shares things together. It's like a communist, socialist like type of community house thing. Everybody's working together, and it's like a Jewish thing, I guess. But soon after Mr. Tibon, 35, took shelter on Saturday with his wife and two young daughters, he knew that there was something very different about this attack: the sound of gunfire. Then came a morbid realization. There were terrorists inside the kibbutz, inside our neighborhood, and at some point outside our window, Mr. Tibon recalled. We could hear them talk. We could hear them run. We could hear them shooting their guns at our house, at our windows. Horrible. That's horrible. Nobody should have to go through that, honestly. Honestly, all conflict in this case is bad. And the people that suffered, the people that lost their lives, there are Israelis who are against the Israeli government or their policies on dealing with Palestinians. Now, I'm not saying that that's a majority, but there are people. And just like how I disagree with like the right wing in my country, I can't go to just a right wing state or a place that's very red like Wisconsin or Utah or something and just start smacking around people who I think are Republicans or conservatives. Like that's dumb. So just going around killing, random Israeli citizens is bad. It's absolutely bad in every way to go around attacking civilians. Soldiers, depending on the context and the place, it's different. It's different when you're attacking soldiers or when you're at war. But when we're talking about fighting civilians or killing civilians or kidnapping civilians, absolutely wrong. I can't get down with that. So, on the Village WhatsApp group, neighbors were posting frantic messages. People were saying, "They are in my house. They are trying to break into the safe room," recalled Mr. T-Bone, a journalist for Haaretz, one of the country's most prominent news outlets. Messages from fellow reporters revealed even more terrifying news. They said that Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, had infiltrated scores of Israeli border towns and that it would take time for the Israeli army to reach the village. Not long afterward, Mr. T-Bone's cell reception started to break up. 13 miles to the east, deep inside Israeli territory, Meitav Haddad and her brother Itamar had no idea that Israel had been invaded. The siblings had switched their phones off for the Jewish Sabbath. Suddenly, shots rang out in their neighborhood of Ofakim, a small city of 33,000 residents in southern Israel. Here's a picture here. Here's a man, crouching down. Gabriel Trigon took cover as rockets launched from Gaza were intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system in Sidera, Israel on Sunday. What a terrible way to live. I mean, the thing about oppressing other people, the Israeli government, by and large, is oppressing the Palestinian people that are within their borders and that are in the West Bank and in Gaza. That is my opinion, and that's my belief. They are oppressing those people. But when you oppress other people, you oppress yourself. We see this time and time again. Time and time again, the people that oppress others end up oppressing themselves. Look at what Russia is going through now: demographic collapse. Millions of their intellectuals and their engineers and their tech people are trying to flee the country. Russia's economy is down the drain. There are so many things that happen when you oppress others, you oppress yourself. And what Israel is doing, to some extent, by oppressing the Palestinians, they're putting their own citizens, like this Israeli man right here, at risk and at danger. So this is why we need fairness and justice in this world. Mr. Haddad, 22, an off-duty soldier, grabbed his rifle and rushed into the street. Miss Haddad, 18, a student at a religious seminary, followed him. They expected perhaps a single shooter, the kind of lone wolf attacker that frequently targets Israeli civilians, Miss Haddad said. But what they found was far more shocking. A squad of Palestinian militants armed with rifles and a shoulder-borne rocket launcher had infiltrated their quiet neighborhood miles from the border with Gaza. We didn't understand what was happening, Miss Haddad said. Terrified, she hid in a playground, but her brother pressed on, joining forces with two other armed residents, cell phone video showed. He began firing on the militants, hitting two before his gun jammed, forcing him to take cover, he said. As he retreated, the militants shot him 3 times, once in the liver, once in the leg, and the third time in the back. He was losing blood fast with nowhere to hide. Desperate for shelter, he began hobbling from house to house, trying to persuade residents to take him inside. Mr. Haddad said no one dared to open up, fearing he himself was a Palestinian fighter. Actually, a horrible situation to be going through, getting shot, trying to defend your family, which anybody should do. Honestly, if somebody was shooting at my wife, my kids, my mother, my father, I'd shoot back regardless of who they were and where they were from or what they were fighting about. Like everybody has the right to defend themselves and their family. But we have to remember we don't hear writing like this. We don't hear stories like this of heroism of the Palestinians, right? When the New York Times or other major media outlets talk about what the Palestinians go through when they're in the West Bank trying to fight back against settlers who are literally walking into their homes and saying, "This is our home now." That's what's happening in the West Bank all the time, all illegal settlements all through the West Bank. And then the New York Times reports about it. There aren't stories saying, "Oh, the Palestinians are heroes. They fought back. They were shooting back at the people that were trying to take their homes or walking to their spaces." We have to remember that the bias in the media is always going to be, at least in the US English media, will pretty much always be on the Israeli side and make them seem like heroes and that sort of thing. And there's blood on both hands, on both sides in this conflict. Honestly, let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it real. But what the Palestinian militants did, breaking into daycares and bursting into people's homes and shooting back at them, is not right. Like your mama used to say, two wrongs don't make a right. Two wrongs don't make a right. By the way, we have the chat open. I see we have 6 people in the stream. Y'all more than welcome to leave comments, build with me. Let's keep on reading here. So, Israeli tanks on their way to border with Gaza on Sunday passed through an area in Siderat that had been attacked by Hamas gunmen. So, this is them with their tanks. Let's continue building. So, to make himself seem less menacing, he stashed his gun in a fuse box. Finally, a couple opened their door and hurried him inside. The three of them stemmed his wounds by tearing up his jeans and using them as a tourniquet, his sister said. As Israeli security forces began to retake control of the town, 2 police officers arrived to take Mr. Haddad to hospital. They heaved him back to the street, flagging down a passing car. By coincidence, it was Mr. Haddad's mother, Tali. After he had failed to return home, the elder Miss Haddad had broken her observance of the Sabbath and borrowed a neighbor's car to search for her son. Now she was there to rescue him. 50 miles to the north, Mr. T-Bone's parents, Noam and Gali T-Bone, also set out to rescue their family, leaving their home in Tel Aviv, jumping into their Jeep, and heading south. Destination Kibbutz Nahal Oz. The couple had just a single pistol to protect them. Noam said. T-Bone no, Noam Tibbon said. I forget that's the same person. Sorry, guys. The couple had just a single pistol to protect them. Noam Tibbon said. But they were not going to stand by while their family was in danger. We understood that if we will not go and get them, nobody will, said Noam Tibbon, a retired general. If there are so many terrorists inside Nahalos, something has collapsed. As they drove south, the couple began to encounter police roadblocks where officers ordered them to turn around. We said, "Listen, we have kids and grandkids in danger," Noam Tibbon said, and we just pushed forward. As they neared the Gaza border, they began to encounter revelers fleeing the rave, sprinting down the road, blood staining their clothes. The couple gave them a lift to a nearby city. The roadside and nearby farmland were strewn with dead bodies, Noam Tibbon said. Horrible scene. Horrible scene. And everybody has the right to protect their children and get to safety. And, this is why refugees can come in all shapes, sizes, colors, nationalities, right? I'm sure if this war or this situation in Israel gets really, really bad and the Israelis need to flee, oh, I'm sure Europe will open their doors for the Israelis, right? But when it comes to the African migrants or the Arab migrants that are leaving southern parts of Africa and North Africa, oh, the door is closed. But I'm pretty sure, if this situation hopefully doesn't have I hope this situation has a peaceful resolution. But if it doesn't, we're going to see more hypocrisy play out when it comes to the refugee situation across the world. So this is a picture here, an infant sleeping in a dining room in Kibbutz Mishmar Ha-Negev on Sunday after being rescued with a family that was hiding in a house in Kibbutz Kafar. A few miles from Kibbutz Nahal Oz, Noam left Miss Tibon at a less dangerous location before traveling onward with a wounded soldier they had encountered on the road. But before they reached the village, they ran into a gunfight between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian militants. The two men jumped out and joined the fray. Mr. Tibon said he then ferried two wounded Israelis to safety, handing them and his Jeep over to his wife, a historian, who drove them north to the hospital. All right, this guy Noam got some big old nuts. I mean, every time he sees a shootout, he's out there popping his gun, busting his gun. I guess he can't wait. But I guess that goes back to what I'm talking about, or what I was talking about earlier. Most of the Israelis have to do military service unless you're like a very observant Jew, like the ones that what's it called, somebody help me in the chat, the Jews that wear the black hats and they have the curly hair and the big beards and they read the Torah all day. Like very observant Jews don't have to serve in the military, but other than that, all Jewish men have to serve, all Jewish men and women, right, have to serve in the military, right? I think there's also an exception for Arab, Palestinians, Muslims who are Israeli citizens, because there's tons of those all over Israel as well, right? So I don't believe they have to serve. I think it's only reserved for Israeli Jews that they have to serve in the military. So maybe Noam got a lot of training and he couldn't wait to bust his gun. You know what I mean? It seems like it. He's out here letting it ring on him. So anyway, Mr. Tibon headed south again, given a lift by a friend, another former general, whom he said he had run into by chance. On the outskirts of Kibbutz Nahal Oz, he said they joined forces with an Israeli commando unit that was about to try to retake the village. After heading inside, they found the streets strewn with bodies, some Palestinian and some Israeli, Noam Tibon said. I wonder how they could tell the difference. Maybe by the uniforms. I mean, I guess the Palestinians came in wearing like, military fatigues and, masks and stuff like that, and Arabic writing on the patches. So I guess so. Then they began clearing the village of militants house by house. Inside their safe room, Amir Tibon and his family could hear them coming. An hour later, there was a bang on the wall of their bomb shelter, Amir Tibon said, and we heard my father say, "I'm here." A very interesting story, very great writing. I like the writing in the story. I want to write something like this one day. But once again, this is just a tragic situation on both ends. Innocent people, party goers, young people, old people, children. A lot of people are getting hurt in this situation. And it did not have to be this way. There could have been in the past a peaceful solution to the Palestinian and Israeli conflict years ago. But instead, Israel and the U.S. and many other foreign backers decided to back a country that was practicing apartheid and separation and brutalizing people. And now we have a situation like this. Let's get into the comments right here. So the Black Mine, they were baited, got 6 billion from the U.S. Yeah, I heard about that. That the Palestinians basically, the U.S. gives money to both sides of this conflict. They donate billions of dollars to the PLO because the PLO has denounced violence. The PLO has said we are not going to be a violent organization to fight against Israel through armed struggle, right? But they can't guarantee that that money will not go to Hamas or Fatah or different like extremist armed struggle organizations, right? So Israel gets a lot of money from the US, of course, and then of course somehow there's maybe financial funneling to the Palestinians, but also the Palestinians get a lot of money from Iran as well. The Iranians are dedicated to fighting against Israel for whatever reason, right? And we're going to get into this real heavy later, but we have to keep it real. We have to keep it real here. I'm going to keep it absolutely real. Does this matter to Black people? We're going to read some articles that might prove maybe we shouldn't care. So Greg Mack says Yemenites and Shardal Jews are with the hats and curls. Yeah, I don't know about the Yemenis. I was talking about the ones like you see in Brooklyn. What's the called, man? I forgot the name. Oh, the Orthodox one, the really Orthodox one. But anyway, the Black Mind says same as the Muslim Brotherhood. So maybe I doubt the U.S. is giving money to the Muslim Brotherhood. But before we get into why Black people should or should not care about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, let's talk about this. Let's do a quick backtrack on everything that's led up to this moment, because this moment of the Palestinians, bursting into Israel from Gaza did not just come out of a vacuum. This has been years and years and years, and things that have been happening in this very year that led up to this moment. So let's get it. Let's get into this. Shout out to Saeed. Saeed says Hardem. I don't know what Hardem means, but let's continue. So here is a timeline of the clashes between Palestinian militants and Israel. The relentless and deadly conflict has persisted for decades. This was written by Emma Bola, published on October 7th, 2023. The scale and complexity of Saturday's attacks by Hamas shocked leaders across the world. They came after decades of a relentless and deadly conflict that has killed thousands of people, forced entire generations to grow up under occupation, or created constant anxiety of impending rocket fire or bombings. Here is a summary of the main events of the conflict, which spans 2 centuries. On several occasions this year, hundreds of Israeli forces carried out military raids in the Palestinian city of Jenin in January. A Palestinian man killed 7 people outside a synagogue in East Jerusalem. After a spate of terrorist attacks in Israeli cities in 2022, Israeli forces killed at least 166 Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. My God. In May 2021, the Israeli police raided Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam, which set off an 11-day war between Israel and Hamas that killed more than 200 Palestinians and more than 10 Israelis. My God, I think you guys remember the videos, if you were around at the time, when the Israelis were literally stomping on the floor of the Al-Aqsa Mosque right here. Very holy site, a place that I want to go to, and that caused a lot of outrage throughout the Muslim world. And this was horrible. I think some people even got killed at Al-Aqsa Mosque, if not this time, times before. And that's never right. It's never okay to shed blood at the mosque. And the Jews know Muslims very well, and they know that they should be respecting these places. But a lot of the Jews believe that one day that Solomon is going to rebuild his temple at the same site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So that's why a lot of them are very hell-bent on either, taking back all of Israel, eliminating the Arabs from Israel. Some very hard right-wing Israelis think that way, that they can, get rid of all these Arabs, the Palestinians, whatever, and make Israel what it's supposed to be, a fully Jewish state committed to the tenets of Judaism and that sort of thing. And that's horrible. Let's get to the comments real quick. Greg Meck says Hasidic. Yes, the Hasidic Jews are the ones. So what I was talking about earlier, if you're a Hasidic Jew living in Israel, you don't have to serve in the military. If you study the Torah all day and you pop out 7 kids, whatever, you don't have to serve in the military. And there's an increasing number of Hasidic Jews in Israel. Israel has like a demographic crisis. It's a country that's getting older. There's not a lot of births from the Jewish people, right? It's like a lot of advanced countries in the world where the women are waiting to have kids later because they have economic opportunity and careers to go into. So, and on top of that, they have another segment of the population that doesn't work. All they do is study the Torah. All they are is religious fanatics. And so Israel is like having a demographic crisis. On top of that, politically, their government is going extremely right-wing. Bibi Netanyahu is like trying to make the country basically authoritarian, trying to stay in power forever. And the Arabs and the Palestinians are producing a lot more children. The population of them is growing in the West and in Gaza. So they're facing like a lot of like pressure on all sides. You know what I mean? And the identity of Israel is still under question, because Israel is supposed to be, or some people argue, is it supposed to be a theocracy, a democracy only for Jewish people, or is this supposed to be a democratic liberal society, meaning that all people can be a part of this society regardless of their religion, national background, ethnicity, like many other modern developed countries in the world, right? So Israel is really a country that has conflicts going on all around it, besides the Palestinian conflict in itself. So it's a very interesting situation that's going on, and it bears a lot of similarities to what's happening in the US with the declining white population, but still we see a spike in white supremacist attacks and racism. So let's get to the comments real quick. The Black Mind says, literally best game plan to seek sympathy, problem, reaction, solution. I have no idea what Black Mind is talking about. TVSX, you don't serve, you don't pay taxes, you barely have to work if you're Hasidic here. Yeah, I don't know if TVSX lives in Israel, but yeah, if you're Hasidic in Israel, like you basically live outside the laws. Like you get to be a religious person all day, and that's a it's a very interesting situation. So let's get to some comments before I continue reading. The Black Mind says, telling an Eritrean that in Israel, Black Mind, you have to get your comments right. I don't know exactly what you're trying to get at here. TVSX says, yes, I do. Okay, shout out to you, brother, wherever you are in Israel. Let us know what it's like there being a Black person, because we're going to talk real heavy today about what it's like to be Black in Israel. So we'd love to hear your opinion about it. And the Black Mind says the Hegelian dialect. Okay, I have to put my phone down and we're just going to keep on reading. So Israeli police entering the Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem in 2021. In 2018, at least 170 Palestinians were killed as Israel responded to protests along the barrier fence that separates Gaza and Israel. Horrible. That's a massacre. In 2014, Hamas kidnapped and killed 3 Israeli teenagers, prompting attacks from Israel and rocket launches from Gaza in a conflict that killed more than 1,881 Palestinians and more than 60 Israelis. My God, both bad on both sides, blood all around. In November 2012, Israel killed Ahmed al-Jabari, Hamas's military chief, setting off more than a week of an exchange of fire in which more than 150 Palestinians and at least 6 Israelis were killed. My God, my God. In January 2009, Israel and Palestinian groups declared unilateral ceasefires. Then Israel withdrew from Gaza and redeployed to the Strip's perimeter. In response to a rocket fire from Gaza, Israel launched an attack on Hamas targets in December 2008 that killed 200 Palestinians. Shortly after, they opened a ground war against Hamas. In total, 1,200 Palestinians and 13 Israelis were killed. In January 2006, about a year after the death of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, the co-founder of the paramilitary organization Fatah, Hamas won the Palestinian parliamentary election. 1 year later, Hamas seized control of Gaza, routing the Fatah forces. Very interesting, very interesting. We're going backwards in time, but as we see, guys, this bloodshed has been going on and on and on for years, and it seems to be intensifying as the years continue to progress. Now we have to remember, because when we're about to get to this article, after I finish this article, we're going to get to the Black perspective on all of this. But we have to remember, on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, there are a ton of Black people in both sides. I spoke before, if you just joined the live stream, I spoke about my ex who was from Gaza. This is her right here. This is the video you can find on my channel right here. If you want to know more about our situation, just rewind this live stream. There are tons of Black people, like we have TVSX, whether he is an Ethiopian, an Eritrean, or somebody else who's a Black person from abroad who lives in Israel. There are Black people all over Israel as well. There are Black people in the West Bank. There are Black people in Gaza. There are Black people in Israel. When we hear about this bloodshed, we have to remember that all Black life is sacred. And when we hear about our brothers and sisters being oppressed on either side, whichever side you take of this conflict, we should be concerned about it. And that's my opinion so far about this. But we're going to get real heavy. So this is a picture, Hamas militants in Gaza City in 2007. These are people all around Hamas. So Hamas is the military wing of the political organization Fatah, which is all about liberation for the Palestinians by any means necessary. Very different from the PLO, which is about liberation for the Palestinians by political means necessary or diplomatic means necessary. But we have to keep it real. We have to keep it real. I think it was either President Biden or Trump who said, the two-state solution isn't real. The tradition in American politics for years has been to say we want a two-state solution. We want 2 states, and that's all they had to say about Israel and Palestine. But when Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, officially and recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, oh, that changed everything right there. That changed everything right there. And that sort of ends the idea of a two-state solution, because I believe the Palestinians wanted to have Jerusalem as their capital, if not East Jerusalem. And Jerusalem will be divided, sort of like how Berlin was divided in Germany. There will be East Jerusalem belonging to the Palestinians and West Jerusalem belonging to Israel as the capital, whatever. Everybody's fighting over this ancient old city. Never been there, would like to go there, though after this live stream, I doubt I will be able to go to Israel without both Israelis or Arabs killing me. So who knows what will happen in the future, but I'll just say this. Right now, Israel is in this situation where the two-state solution is not possible. So I don't know what the PLO is talking about if they really think that they can get a solution to this problem just based on going to the UN or petitioning politicians around the world to recognize Palestine as an independent state. Palestine will never be Kosovo. Palestine will never be Kosovo, and we have to accept that. Palestine will never be what Kosovo is. Kosovo will one day be an independent free nation. I've been to Kosovo. They already live like they are. Hell, in my lifetime, I expect Kosovo to join the EU. Let's keep it a buck. Palestine will never be that. They have no friends. The other Arab nations, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all of them are trying to get friendly with the Israelis because the Israelis are good at putting down minorities or people that are fighting against the government. So let's keep it a buck. All the Arab nations never. They kept it together for Palestine for a long time, but now this new age of Arab leaders are like, look, let's make peace with the Israelis. One thing we can get from the Israelis are weapons. They can teach us how to oppress our minorities or the people that want democracy in the Arab world. They can teach us that because they're very good at that, at doing that against the Palestinians, our own brothers and sisters. So let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. We're keeping it real on this channel. The Palestinians. So let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. We're keeping it real on this channel. The Palestinians will never get freedom through the two-state or through political means. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. What would have to happen, and I do not support violence by any means from any group of people, it would have to take a catastrophe, a catastrophic fall of the Israeli government or something happening on the outside world where America no longer backs Israel and they no longer have backing from large foreign powers that can guarantee their security and safety to make Israel finally give up and give the Palestinians what they want. That's what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that the uh, Palestinians need to take up arms and fight, because that's a losing battle. That's like saying Black Americans need to take up our fight to the US government and we just need to wage guerrilla warfare throughout the country. Hell no. Hell no. Violence in that means is not the matter. It's not the way to get our solution. That's my belief. I'm keeping it absolutely real. What would have to happen is something catastrophic would have to happen to Israel's political and diplomatic situation for the Palestinians to get freedom. I'm just keeping it a buck. I'm just keeping it real as far as I see it. You get what I'm saying? So I'm going to continue in the history, but let's get into the comments real quick. TVSX, I'm African American, and I stand out just a bit on both sides from the Africans who reside here. Plus, I only speak a very small amount of Hebrew. I never have any issues in any other place I go. Very interesting. Very good to hear that. You know, we've been hearing stories about the Ethiopians and the Eritreans, getting abused, getting discriminated against. We're going to read stories about that, and we would love to have your input on that as we continue to build on this story. Israel, I imagine, because I have not been there, is probably more akin to the places in Western Europe or the, developed world, as in that they tolerate minorities being around, they tolerate people of different phenotypes being around, because, many of the people in those nations travel abroad, they go and study abroad, they meet people of different places, some of them even marry people of different races or spaces and that sort of thing. And plus, Israel itself is a multi-racial, multi-ethnic, multinational nation, meaning that many Jews from Russia, many Jews from all over Europe, many Jews from Africa, many Jews from all over the place commingle there. So on paper, it should be sort of like a rainbow nation, sort of like South Africa is or America is on paper, right? But of course, I think what actually happens is that anti-Black racism will actually appear. While not every Black person, of course, will experience anti-Black racism, we have to admit when it does happen, when it does appear, and if it is endemic or systemic to a society. And that's what I think needs to be built on. You get what I'm saying? But I would love to have your input, TVX, or anybody else who wants to build on this Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and should Black people care about it. We had 10 people in the live chat. Let's build even more heavy. We're almost finished with this article, and then we're going to build real heavy. So In September 2005, Israeli troops pulled out of Gaza, but Israel came under criticism for restricting the movement of Palestinians coming in and out of the Strip. In September 2000, a few months after negotiations between Israel and Palestine reached an impasse at Camp David, a second intifada began with Palestinian youth throwing stones at the Israeli police. Support for Hamas continued to grow within Palestine because of its readiness to fight Israel. In 1997, two suicide bomb attacks killed 27 people, and Israel's Prime Minister, Shimon Peres, said he would wage an incessant war against Hamas. In 1993, Mr. Arafat signed the Oslo Accords with Israel and committed to negotiating an end to the conflict based on a two-state solution. Hamas, which opposed the deal, launched a series of suicide bombings in Israel. Very interesting. I'm sure people have seen this picture before. I'm sure people have seen this historic picture before where many people thought the Israeli and Palestinian conflict would end, but it did not end because, of course, Israel and the United States were not truly dedicated to giving the Palestinians their own state, their own freedom, and that sort of thing. And we have to keep it real. Let's go back to the map here. Let's go back to the map here. The two-state solution would not work because, let's keep it real, how are the West Bank and Gaza supposed to unite as one state when they are separated by a large piece of land that Israel wants to retain control of? That sounds very similar to Pakistan and East Pakistan, aka Bangladesh. For those that don't know, when India was partitioned by the British and Pakistan was created and India was created, they created two Pakistans. There was Pakistan that we know today and East Pakistan. Are those two places countries now? No, they had to wage a war against each other, two Muslim countries fighting against each other to get freedom, right? The Bangladeshis eventually got their freedom. So I can't see how this is supposed to work. A two-state solution, this looks more like a three-state solution. It looks like something that would not actually be functioning. You get what I'm saying? So let's keep it real. Let's go back to the text here. Who else said that? TVX said exactly, but anti-blackness does exist here. Absolutely. Like it does everywhere in the world. And once again, guys, we never let anti-blackness hold us back from being black, glorious, black, excellent, anything, but we have to acknowledge it because that's the only way we can survive in this world, and also educate our children about it and hopefully put an end to it the more we educate people about it. So let's continue building here. In December 1987, Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza started the first intifada against Israel. Muslim Brotherhood members founded Hamas. On March 26, 1979, Egypt and Israel signed a peace treaty at the White House, which led to Israel's complete withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula. The two countries agreed on the framework of an agreement to allow for self-rule for Palestinians living in occupied territories. 3 years later, President Reagan expressed his support for their full autonomy with some Jordanian supervision, but Israel rejected the plan. Yeah, Reagan actually kind of had a good idea. I disagree with Ronald Reagan on almost everything, but yeah, Reagan's idea for full autonomy for the West Bank or with Jordanian help, that sounds like an actually good plan. Instead, what has happened since then is that Israel has continued to allow settlements to be built in the West Bank. People illegally, it's illegal for people to move into an occupied territory and then claim it as the state that they come from, which literally happens in the West Bank. It's illegal for people to be living in open air prisons like in the Gaza Strip. What Israel does is condemned by most of the world. Most of the world agrees what Israel does to the Palestinians is wrong. The only reason Israel is allowed to get away with it is because at the UN Security Council, all the resolutions to try to sanction Israel for what they do, who's blocking it? Who's blocking it? The home of white supremacy, the home of racism, the most evil nation in the world, the United States of America. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, I said it. The United States of America protects Israel and all the evil they do against the Palestinians, and we have to acknowledge that. Let's keep it real. Another thing that I want to bring up, I don't like to talk about conspiracy theories on my channel. I don't do conspiracy theories at all. I'm all about facts. I'm all about reading. I'm all about learning. But I've heard that Hamas was actually somewhat created by the Israelis themselves. Now, y'all might think I'm crazy, but I heard that the PLO was gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of stronghold and a foot on gaining Palestinian independence and liberation for the states. But what happened instead was that the Israelis said we need to create a right-wing counter to the PLO. An organization that's all about destroying Israel, or an organization that's very right wing and problematic. So that way we can actually counter the PLO because they're gaining. So we need to make some balance to that. I don't know if that's true. I saw a video on YouTube about it. You can look it up yourself, but I think there might be some truth to that. Whether that is true or not, what Hamas is doing to innocent Israelis is absolutely wrong. And what Israel has continually done to the West Bank and Gaza is absolutely wrong. But should black people care? That's the question. We're going to get to it. I promise. I promise. I promise. So, on Yom Kippur in October 1973, invading forces from Egypt and Syria tried to persuade Israel to negotiate better terms for the Arab countries. Nearly 2,700 Israeli soldiers died in the 19-day war, and thousands were injured out of a population of about 3 million at the time. In June 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel gained control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula. Here are pictures of that day. Israeli fighter jets flying over the Sinai on the first day of the Six-Day War in 1967. In January 1957, Israel withdrew from Egyptian land, except from the Gaza Strip and the area of the Gulf of Aqaba, arguing that the Gaza Strip never belonged to Egypt. In October 1956, a few months after the Egyptian president nationalized the Suez Canal waterway, cutting off Israel from shipping, Israel invaded the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip. In November that year, the United Nations called for Britain, France, and Israel to withdraw from troops from Egypt. And in 1949, the newly created state of Israel signed a series of truces with Arab countries that had declared war on it. Under the 1949 agreements, the Gaza Strip was under Egypt's control. So that is generally a general overview of the Palestine-Israeli conflict. And I really dislike, but I also like this picture because I think this sums up so much of what is wrong with this world. Now, I have to keep it real. I got a comment here. Let's see what the black mind said. The black mind said, they are Africans. If you live in Africa, assimilate. I have no idea what the black mind is saying. Anybody in the chat, please talk to this man and help him get his sentences right. I don't know what he's talking about. But let's get to this. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it real. Should black people care about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict when there is rampant anti-blackness in Israel? Should we care about it? Should we care when almost, with a quick Google search, with a quick Bing search, by talking and interviewing the people who are living in Israel, who are of my complexion or darker, who come from countries in Africa or other places in the world, should we care about a country that is committed to not only upholding a idea that we might think is strange, a theocratic ethno-state, right? Should we support that sort of nation in their bid to continue to exist? I don't know. Let's read a little bit. Read a little bit here. This is an article from Middle East Policy Council. Ethiopian Jews confront racism in Israel. This is a very deep article, so let's get into it, and then I'll build heavy on it. So, on Sunday, Israelis of Ethiopian descent took to the streets of Tel Aviv to protest against systemic discrimination. The demonstrations, triggered by a leaked video showing police officers physically assaulting an Ethiopian Israeli soldier and then filing false charges against him, soon turned violent, with many expressing fears of greater civil unrest to come. The demonstrations have been compared to the anti-police brutality protests in many of America's cities, most recently Baltimore. But Israeli politicians and commentators rejected any comparison, suggesting that the two contexts are very different from each other, claiming that discrimination in Israel is not nearly as systemic and endemic as in the United States. Yet many are calling for serious social reflection on the matter, warning that unless action is taken to better integrate the Ethiopian Jewish minority, things can only get worse. We have to keep it real. We have to keep it absolutely real. When the white supremacists or people that make apologetics for white supremacists say, what you're going through in America is not similar to what they're going through in Brazil, or what they're going through in Israel is not similar to what's going on for black people in Mexico or Canada or in the UK. It's not. We will not fall for that bait. We will not fall for that bait anywhere. Any is oppressed, that falls on us. Because if my black ass were to go to Israel and people did not hear me speak, did not see my nationality for some reason, if they could, they would still assume that I am a black African, and all the negative stereotypes that are associated with black people fall on me as well. I do not think I'm special because I'm American, and nobody should, depending on what type of black person you are, no matter where you are in the world. An attack on one of us is an attack on all. Discrimination against one of us is a discrimination against all of us, because there have been places I've gone in the world and people have said, "What part of Nigeria are you from?" Or "You must be a refugee," or "You must be an immigrant," or "You must be a student," or that sort of thing. Not once in the world has anybody ever assumed I'm black American. Not once in the world. They assume all the negative things about all of us together. We have to understand that. This is why all black people have to be on code against white supremacy. So we will not tolerate this, gaslighting that the white supremacists do. Oh, what's going on in Israel is not as endemic or discriminatory or systematic as what we're doing to you, Ethiopian black Jew. No, no, it is. It is. Because if they're facing the same thing, the police are knocking them over upside the head. They pile up in the jail system. Their kids don't get the best education. That's the same thing we're going through. So yes, it is the same, wherever it came from. Let's continue building here. I got some comments here. So the theory is like saying that Malcolm X is made to make a right wing. Yeah. Saeed, that's a very, like I said, I don't do conspiracies on my channel, Saeed. I just heard that. I heard it and I just wanted to say it out there. I don't know if it's true or not. Like Donald Trump said, I don't know what is true. People are saying this. I just heard that the Israelis might have funded a group that eventually became Hamas because they wanted to make a right wing to the PLO. I just heard it. I don't know if it's true. And even if it's not true or it is true, it still doesn't change the fact that Hamas is an organization dedicated to destroying Israel, and wherever they get their funding is quite questionable because they're a heavily sanctioned terroristic group. And yeah, let's go here to the next part. Greg Mack, no, they both enslaved blacks. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Greg Mack, whites and Arabs had our ancestors enslaved. Absolutely true. World Traveler, didn't they support apartheid in South Africa? Yes, they did. Tudo Rocket, blacks need to be together and accept that once you are black, you are considered an African. Absolutely true. Absolutely. We just need to be on code. Black people need to be on code. We can identify as African or not African, but we have to remember that the white supremacists see us all as the same. There's a comment here from World Traveler. Ethiopians are treated like animals. I don't know about that, if they're treated like animals in Israel. And Greg Mack says, are you from Cuba? Do you play basketball? You look like Shaquille O'Neal. You look like Michael Jordan. Exactly, man. I've gotten so many comparisons. Oh, you look like Tupac. Oh, you look like Michael Jordan. You look like Martin Lawrence. This is how I know that a lot of white people don't know black people, because there's no way in hell I look like Martin Lawrence. I've heard white people tell me I look like Martin Lawrence. Anyway, let's get into this more about the Ethiopian Jews and what they're going through in Israel. The initial response from the government, according to the Haaretz report, was one of condemnation for both the police violence as well as the lawlessness that followed it. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday in an address to Knesset that the government of Israel was determined to change the situation on the ground for the Ethiopian Israeli community following days of violent protests over claims of racism and police brutality. Earlier Monday, President Reuven Rivlin said Israel must look upon the open and bloody wound which the protests in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem revealed. He made the comments during a meeting with the local leaders of Israel's ultra-Orthodox community. We've erred. We have failed to see and listen enough. Among those protesting in the streets, there can be found the best of our boys and girls, excellent students and former soldiers. We must give them answers. Absolutely. And that's a good state answer. When the politicians see people out in the streets protesting against discrimination or bias, that sort of thing, the answer to that should be, listen, we need to see those people as fellow citizens, as our fellow sisters, sons, daughters, fathers, that sort of thing, and so that's a good response. Has that actually happened? I think not, but let's continue building here. So, despite the anger on display and the grievances expressed by members of the Ethiopian Jewish community, superficially resembling the recent experience of Ferguson or Baltimore, Jerusalem's post uh, Abramowitz Abramowitz argues that America is the wrong lens through which to see the developments in Israel. The marches in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv belong to the plain-clothed Ethiopian soldiers. Nearly all of them have served, are serving, or are about to serve in the IDF, Israeli Defense Force. Today's battle is not against external enemies, but against invisibility and injustice. The Jews of silence today on racism in Israel are found not only in the Israeli government and the police force, but also among world Jewry. These rallies by the Ethiopian community should be seen through the lens of hope and not despair, through the lens of Zionism and not Ferguson. There are only about 130,000 Ethiopian Israelis, with thousands of college graduates, near universal military service, and now a whole generation that is empowered. There is not a single issue facing the Ethiopian community in Israel that can't be resolved through enlightened philanthropy and government action. I hate when they try to diminish our numbers, when they say there are only 130,000 Ethiopian Israelis. That's a lot of people. And we have to remember, as Black people, we are a visible minority. There might be, I don't know, maybe 50,000 Ukrainian Jews in Israel, right? But they can blend in, they can hide. They're not a visible minority. This is why racism and anti-Black racism is a very specific problem. Because tell me where in the world I, as a Black man, can go hide outside of Africa. Where is I, as a Black man in Israel, can I not be pointed out as, hey, the Blacks are over there, or there's a Black guy right there? If I was Ukrainian, if I was German, if I was some other type of white Jew, I could blend in and hide. So to say there's only 130,000, we're 130,000. There might be 130,000, but if you ask the average Israeli, I'm sure they might say, oh, there's a million Black people here. There's too many Black people here, even though they might be the smallest minority. It's because we are a very visible group within that community and that sort of thing. And can the situation about anti-Black racism in Israel be solved through philanthropy and government action? Yes, if that government action or that philanthropy is actually sending the message out there that anti-Black racism is wrong, that it's not okay to discriminate against Black people specifically. I believe that white supremacy can be solved through messaging and targeting. We have to drill it in people's heads the same way they drill feminism in our head, and every man in the world now knows that it's not okay to refer to women as X, Y, and Z, that it's not okay now to tell your wife to get in the kitchen or iron your shirt. The same way that was drilled into a generation of men's heads that it's not okay to disrespect women, we have to drill it in the heads of every person in the world that anti-Black racism is very specific, very real, and needs to be stopped, and it can take many different forms. If that is the type of philanthropy or government action that they're talking about, yeah, let's do that. But if they're just talking about, hey, let's build some community centers and let the niggas play basketball, nah, that's not what we want. That's not what we need. I'm continuing building here. So, Eretz, Shevas, Shalom, Polak. Boy, these Jewish names are hard. Aretz Sheva Shalom Palak also makes an effort to distance, perhaps unconvincingly, the plights of Ethiopian Jews in Israel from that of the African American community in the United States. Ethiopian Jews dreamed for thousands of years to return to Jerusalem. They were not snatched out of Africa to be slaves, but were reunited with brothers in Israel. The color of rioters' skin may be the same as those burning Baltimore down, but my Ethiopian brothers and sisters have a Yiddish Nemashe soul. Okay. They have a Yiddish soul. They never terrorized Jewish neighborhoods in Brooklyn or mugged my grand. Oh my God, that's so racist. Oh my God, that's so racist. Jesus Christ. They never terrorized Jewish neighborhoods in Brooklyn or mugged my grandfather. As if all Black people do in New York is try to target Jewish people and mug their grandfathers. Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. See, this is why white supremacy exists in everybody. A lot of Jews might watch this live stream now, or Israelis might watch this live stream now and say, I can't be white supremacist. My father or grandfather died in the Holocaust, or, you know, I have tons of Black friends, or I listen to only Drake or Lenny Kravitz. But God, come on, man. This is an inherently anti-Black statement. The Ethiopian Jews never terrorized Jewish communities or mugged my grandfather. Let's think about that, man. Let's think about that. There were Jewish slave owners in the United States. There were Jewish people who turned a blind eye or explicitly participated in the terrorizing of Black neighborhoods in the United States. We're going to read later about Jewish people literally terrorizing Ethiopian neighborhoods in Israel. So, what are they talking about? What are you talking about? The black people never terrorize Jewish neighborhoods. Yeah, that's not what we do. Black people don't go around terrorizing other communities. We don't go to other countries and try to colonize them. We don't go to other people's lands and force them to speak our language. We don't go to other people's nations and take away their religion. We don't do that. Certain groups of people do. The type of people you think are safe and nice, but not us. Not us. So don't even put that on us. I hate when the white supremacists give these stupid talking points. Let's get into some comments real quick. So Private C says, Shalom. Shalom, brother. And he says 100, 100, 100, 1,000. Let's keep building here. So they never terrorized Jewish neighborhoods in Brooklyn or mugged my grandfather. These brothers came home to us with a pure heart and soul. Surely we need cops, good Jewish cops with a good Jewish education. Then their sticks would be holy as their Jewish neshamat or soul, I think. Israel would do well to cultivate the Jewish neshama. That would solve just about all of our problems. See, this is like typical, white supremacist talking point. Everybody just get along. Guys, listen, if we all just hold hands, get along, close our eyes really hard and not see color, we could end racism. See, the same talking points, no matter where you are in the world, come from the same typical white supremacists. People that are not ready to accept that anti-black racism is a very specific problem and needs targeted solutions. Always say the same thing. We need to cultivate the soul of America. We need to cultivate the Jewish neshama. We need to always just hold hands with everybody and just forget about racism. Despite that anti-black racism continues to permeate, let's just cultivate the heart, buddy. It's all about the heart. I don't have a racist bone in my body, buddy. I can't be racist. I don't see color. I don't see color. I don't know what the comments are saying, but I hope y'all are still with me. Y'all build with me, man. Many have expressed similar support for making that distinction, but it is clear from this Times of Israel report that many Israelis of Ethiopian descent feel like strangers in their own country, a feeling shared by many African Americans in the United States when faced with police brutality or policy brutality. What began as a peaceful protest turned into bedlam in the heart of Tel Aviv Sunday as demonstrators gathered to protest police brutality and alleged institutional racism against Israel's Ethiopian population. Yitzhak, a religious Ethiopian man with side curls and a large white yarmulke, commented, "I feel like we're strangers, like we're not Jews. We fight all these wars," he said, "but this is a real war." While Yitzhak believed that he, as a father, had to come to the demonstration for the sake of his children, he was unconvinced that there would be any discernible effect. This protest, there will be more and more of it, said Yitzhak, who, like the rest of the protesters, refused to provide his last name for fear of legal consequences. But in a few days, it will blow over. Then where will we be? He asked. It is true that the protests leading up to and including Sunday's violence have shaken many in Israel, with the Knesset speaker warning of imminent social crisis as opening summer session as Ethiopian protest against discrimination set to continue, specifically referencing the demonstration Sunday night in Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. Edelstein called the event a sad chapter in the history of Israeli society. We must ensure freedom of speech with a broad hand. However, once it becomes incitement, violence, and anarchism, we must not only not allow this to happen, but treat it severely. The speaker then called on all citizens of Israel not to be dragged into a civil war in spite of continuing protests in Jerusalem later on Monday. While distancing from the violence that took place on Sunday, there is no question in the mind of many Israeli commentators that the frustration is justified given the discrimination members of the Ethiopian community are subjected to. As Yedioth Aronoth's Nahum Barnea points out, boy, those Jewish names are hard. Those Israeli names are, woo, points out, xenophobia is not only rooted in Israel, it is only encouraged by politicians on the eve of elections. The young protesters are forcing Israelis to look in the mirror, and it's not a pretty sight. The Israeli society is inflicted with racism. Racism is far more common in skin color, whose victims are foreign workers, Israelis of Ethiopian descent, and sometimes Israelis of Yemeni descent and Israeli Arab. There is racism of nationality, of sexual inclination. Okay, all right, stop. They need to stop. This is why I don't like the word racism, because when we start saying the word racism, then everybody feels like they get a piece. Yeah, they're racist against me because I have green eyes. Yeah, they're racist against me because I'm an Israeli white Arab. They need to stop. Racism is a specific targeting of people of specific phenotypical difference, people that can phenotypically be identified to correspond with a specific race. Even though race is a social construct and has no real bearing on biology, there is no difference between me biologically and a white man or a Chinese man by and large. But what we define as race is a social construct that we actually participate in every day, and it has real world consequences. It's like money. Race is like money. Money is not real. The $100 bill in front of you has no intrinsic value other than the value you put on it. Therefore, it's the same as race. We put a value or premium or this premium, whatever, the opposite of what premium is, on black skin and white skin and that sort of thing in this world we live in. Certain people get certain privileges and certain treatment based on their skin and the society and the context that they're in. The same way money has a certain value depending on the society and context you're in. $100 is worth $100 in the US, but in Hungary, it's worth about what, 30,000 florins or something like that. The same with race. It's all a social construct that we actually participate in, and it is not racism for somebody to discriminate against you based on your nationality or your sexual inclination or your gender. Y'all get your own word for that. But if y'all want racism, fine, y'all can have it. That's why we're using the term anti-black discrimination. Anti-black discrimination. That's what we're talking about specifically. So stop using the word racism like it means nothing. All right. Private C says, I went to Israel, saw the treatment of Yemeni and Ethiopian Jews. They lying. I don't know what that means. Who's lying? Are you saying that the Ethiopian Jews are treated badly or they're treated well? I don't know what you're saying here. Greg Mack says in Brooklyn they have private security companies that guard the Jewish homes and it's private property to the public. Wow. Okay. So listen, Brooklyn is like there's like more Jews in Brooklyn, I believe, than actually in Israel or something like that. There's a lot of Jews in Brooklyn, and it's a very heavy place where a lot of Jews hang out. And listen, there's nothing wrong with Jewish people. I have no problem with Jewish people. I have no problems with people practicing their religion or having a tribe or a faith or that sort of thing. But I am against apartheid, oppression, against all groups of people, especially societies that practice anti-black racism. Oh yes, you will always be the enemy to me if you practice anti-black racism. So let's continue building here. Mistakes have been made and will be made, but the racism comes from the bottom, not from the top, and it cannot be erased through budgetary decisions. Accepting that reality can help the recent events become a turning point for race relations in Israel, says Ben Dror Yemeni. The protest, which paralyzed Tel Aviv on Sunday, was a furious, justified, and pivotal protest. It's less important than 90% of Israelis oppose this violence. It's much more hurtful when the Ethiopians feel, again and again, humiliated by those who should be defending them. It's painful, it's frustrating. And to add insult to injury, the policy went out of control on Sunday, and the smart restraint was replaced by another display of pillars of smoke and fire by the police. All of us, not just the police, should turn this protest into a turning point because it's not us and them. It's us, only us. So, however, as Michael Freund points out in a recent op-ed for the Jerusalem Post, it is clear that any answer to this vexing issue, if it is going to provide effective relief and improve race relations in Israel, must take into account the needs of the Ethiopian community living in Israel. The violence that erupted should hardly come as a surprise, given the failures that have characterized efforts to integrate Ethiopian Jews into the Jewish state. The turmoil that ensued was as predictable as it was lamentable. With more than half of Ethiopian immigrant families living below the poverty line, including nearly 2/3 of Ethiopian children, more needs to be done to empower the community members and give them hope for a better future. While the violence by protesters in any form cannot be tolerated, it is essential that Sunday's riot in Tel Aviv could be used as a turning point, one that will ensure that a greater effort is made to address the challenges facing Ethiopian immigrants. We brought Ethiopian Jews home, but now we must make them feel at home for their sake as well as ours. So let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. So Saeed said Ethiopians are treated badly in Israel. Absolutely. And that's what this article has shown, and more information is out there, and we're going to read more about that heavily. But let's keep it real. For anybody who comes on this channel and says there's no anti-black racism in Israel, tell me this: how come the majority of the Ethiopian Jews are poor? How come the majority of them live in ghettos? How come the majority of them work menial jobs? Why is that? If there's no anti-black racism, it should be evenly distributed. Their poverty rate should be the same as other parts of Israel. But why is that? Why is it that the Ethiopian Jews tend to suffer more? That's a society that has systemic anti-black racism in it. For anybody, for any society that says there's no racism here, but then you look at their society and their social strata, all the light-skinned people are at top, all the white adjacent people or literal white people are at the top, and meanwhile all the black and brown people suffer at the bottom, there's anti-black racism there. Leave it alone. But let's talk more about this. Let's go. So I'm going to get hated from everybody. Today, everybody's going to hate me. If you like Palestine, you're about to hate me even more. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, man. We're going to build real heavy. Real heavy. Black Palestinians face subtle racism in Gaza. Let's go. Let's go. I spoke about this at the beginning of the live stream chat. My ex was from Gaza. Beautiful woman named Riham told me all about living in Gaza and how people told her that her hair was nasty and that she was ugly because she was black. And growing up in Gaza, they told her horrible things about her blackness living around the Arabs. And I've been lit on my channel since the very beginning I started my channel. I've been calling out anti-black racism in the Arab world. And boy, don't y'all ever think for a second, just because Palestinians are facing the worst type of white supremacy that ever existed, don't practice anti-black racism. Don't ever think that. Don't ever think that, ever, ever. The Arabs are known. They are happy and proud about doing blackface on national TV. They are happy and proud about calling us slaves. In 2023, Abd, Zanj, all the other slurs they have for us. It ain't different in Gaza. It ain't different in the West Bank. Y'all keep it a buck. Y'all keep it a buck. I'm keeping it real on this channel. And I'm always going to keep it real. I'm going to call out everybody. Everybody's getting it. Shots everywhere. Israel's getting it. Palestine's getting it. Black people should not give a funk about what happens in Israel and Palestine, because both sides hate on us. Let's keep it real. Black Palestinians face subtle racism in Gaza. Obayed, who believes his ancestors came from Sudan, says he has to work twice as hard to prove himself. This was published on Gulf News on May 5th. 2017. Here's Obayed, and listen, man, he looks just like Reham's brother. Just like Reham's brother, man. And you'll notice this, all the Arabs, all the black Arabs, man, they don't have like 4C hair. But even if they got a little bit of curls, they do whatever they can to try to straighten it out, because they're living under crazy white supremacy where they're told their afros are ugly, their big noses are ugly, their black skin is ugly, and that sort of thing. That's rampant in the Arab world. And don't y'all ever think it's the same or different in Gaza or the West Bank just because they're fighting against white supremacy and racism from the Israelis. Get out of here. Get out of here. Let's go. Let's go. So black people in Gaza constitute a minority of 1% of the total population of 2 million people inhabitants living in Gaza Strip. Yet one may wonder if any discrimination is practiced against them and how far can it go. Gaza. Black Palestinians constitute a minority of 1% of the total population of the 2 million inhabitants living in the Gaza Strip. While it's difficult to accurately pin their exact origins, many say they they were brought from, enslaved, captured, kidnapped, forced to come to Palestine, Israel, whatever you want to call it. They came from Ghana, Sudan, and Egypt, or at least that's what has been passed down through their oral history. Many first came to Palestine during the Islamic conquest as slaves to serve their owners in the 7th century. It is also reported that another wave of Africans emigrated to Palestine in the late 19th century to work as merchants or fighters under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. No, that's whitewashing. Nobody was traveling saying, hey, I want to go fight for the Ottomans. Let them cut off my dick willfully. No, nobody did that. Stop it. Despite their deep roots in Palestine, many still encounter racism and discrimination, although it is to a much less degree as how poorly people of color are treated in other countries, particularly in the US. No, if you have to write articles about it, if the people have to come on here smiling and kowtowing and saying, listen, man, we're dealing with racism, well, please don't treat us like they do abroad. You're dealing with anti-black racism, and that's horrible. Racism is like radiation. It affects the minds of people and kills them slowly. Obayed probably dealt with worse racism than I did, because the thing is, in the Arab world, what we know to be racist for the somewhat more free black people in the diaspora, like the Americas and the UK and that sort of thing, what we know to be racist, like blackface, like slurs like Zanj or Abid and stuff like that, what we know to be racist, they're okay with it. I'm sure this black man was called slave more times than Kunta Kinte. This black man here saw blackface more on TV than a black kid in 1920s America. Whatever. You get what I'm saying. The blacks in North Africa, in the Arab world, deal with so much racism that they think it's okay and normal. You will have to fight with a black Arab telling them what's racist because they don't find it racist. They'll let a white Arab call them a slave all day. They'll let a white Arab do blackface right in front of them all day. They'll let a white Arab tell them, you can't be the imam here. You can't pray with us or in front of us because you're black. You're a slave. The black Arabs go through the worst type of racism you'll ever imagine. And then they want to come and tell us, oh, it's not as bad as what you're going through in the US. Get the F out of here. Boy, 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 let's go. All right. Mohammed Obaid, 26, a folklore dancer and founder of the Dabki Club for Children, thinks his ancestors originally came from Sudan. My grandparents worked as merchants in 1948 areas, which is considered Beersheba in Israel today. They were displaced when Israel was created, and we have lived in Gaza ever since, he told Gulf News. At least 11,000 black Palestinians live in Al-Jalal district of Gaza in a neighborhood called Al-Abid. Al-Abid, which means slave in Arabic. These people, this is a shame. See, I'm mad at the black people and also at the Arabs who allow this to happen. I'm mad at everybody involved. I'm keeping it real. And I saw people dropped out of the chat because I don't give a who likes me or doesn't like me. I don't care. I'm going to point this out. The black Arabs deal with this stuff in their face all the time. They literally live in a neighborhood called Al-Abid, the slave. Imagine black Americans living in a neighborhood called slave quarters. Imagine black Americans living in a neighborhood called Old Plantation Nigger Road. This is what the black Arabs deal with, and they think it's okay. And the Arabs think it's okay, and Muslims think it's okay. This is the reason why on my channel, y'all don't see me giving a when I drink on my channel, when I eat pork on my channel, because I know a lot of the stuff, a lot of the Muslims talk about is BS. All of the Muslims talk about, oh, there's no racism in Islam. Oh, in Islam, we love everybody. Oh, in racism, in Islam, we're not supposed to see color or be racist. But what do all the Arabs do? What do all the Arabs do? Be explicitly racist to black people every single day. And I'm sick of it, man. I'm sick of it. Every Arab country you go to, all the black people live in ghettos. All the black people live in the poorest parts of the country. All the black people get the scraps. They're literally selling us as slaves in Libya and that sort of thing. And it does not change because it's in Gaza or the West Bank or the Palestinians are going through the worst of the worst. And I'm sick of this, man. I'm sick of this. I don't give up. I'm standing up and speaking out for all black people who are going through this stuff in the Arab world. Because when I was going in the Arab world, when I was living in Tunisia, when I was traveling around Qatar, when I was outside, all I saw were black Arabs going through the worst. And when I met Riham, and then she told me, oh, black Americans need to get it together. Y'all don't know, y'all are not dealing with racism and that sort of thing. Maybe she was right. Because I ain't never had a white man come up to my face, tell me, hey, do you live in the slave quarters of our city? Come on now. Get out of my face with this, man. All this Islam talk, Muslim talk. There's peace and harmony in Islam. All the Arabs, there's no racism in Islam. But they got the black people living in a part of the city called the slave quarters. Stop it. I'm hot, man. I'm sorry, man. I need to drink some water. Sorry. All right. Anyway, let's get into some comments, man. Maybe y'all cool me down or maybe y'all make me more hot. So, Tudo Rocket, there is racism in the world except in Africa. I don't mean North Africa. Tudo Rocket says, I swear, bro, fact 100. There's white supremacy in Africa, but is there anti-black racism? Maybe not so much. But let's talk about that in South Africa. I don't know. We're talking about South Africa. That's a different story. Let's continue reading. So among friends and co-workers, Obaid is known as Samara, which means dark-skinned. And the Arabs say that they're not dealing with anti-black racism. Jesus Christ. I am proud of who I am, so I don't take it in a bad way, he said. I consider it to be a distinguished nickname, which gives a special flavor to my personality. Boy, you a coon. You let them white Arabs come up to you and call you darky. Stop playing with me. You are a coon. You're a coon if you're a black man living today talking about, All my white Arab friends call me darky. They call me Samara. And yeah, I live in a neighborhood called the slave quarters. You dumbass. You dumbass. I'm mad at the black people that have to go through this because they think it's okay, but I'm even more mad at the black Arabs that think this is cool. It's not cool. Let's continue building though. Ugh. Although there is no official discriminatory policy against black Palestinians, Obayed says that subtle racism makes his life more difficult than light-skinned Palestinians. If I wasn't the best dancer, I wouldn't be on the Dabki team, he said. I always have to prove myself twice as much as others. Many black Palestinians are not considered for jobs that require direct communication or interaction with customers. Facts. You go to the Arab world, plenty of black people working in the back of the kitchen. Never see a black man in an Arab country sitting at the front office willing to take your order. Never see a black man working at a bank. Never see black women doing any jobs of dignity in the Arab world. And it's no different in Palestine. We keeping it real. Yeah, the Palestinians are going through it, but how you treat your black people you do not deserve mercy from us. We are not on y'all side. Y'all want to oppress us? What? The Palestinians want to take over Israel, destroy Israel. Why? So then y'all can continue to do blackface on TV? So y'all can build a bigger neighborhood called the slave quarters and put all the black Arabs in ghettos? Let's keep it a buck, man. Y'all might be seeing me getting more hot on the Arabs, but I think it's even more shameful for the Arabs to act this way towards black people. It's even more shameful for the Arabs because I have a lot of love for the Arabic language, Arabic culture, and on top of that, I'm a Muslim myself. And a lot of the Palestinians are Muslim and they say that they're fighting for Islam and that sort of thing. But how they treat the black people here is un-Islamic. It's un-Islamic and it's absolutely not right. The Jews have their own thing. The Jews believe that they are a special people and that they are God's chosen people. It's almost, let's keep it real. Let's keep it absolutely real. The Jewish religion is inherently racist because the Jews believe that they are a special chosen people by God and everybody else is not important generally. Generally. The Arabs and the Muslims generally believe that everybody on earth is valuable. And if you believe in Allah and his prophet, peace be upon him, you will go to Jannah. You can be saved. You can be a good person if you follow Islam. Black Muslims in Palestine get treated like crap, called slaves. White Arabs coming up to them yelling darky. And then they want to talk about we're fighting for Islam. Well, make me a kafir then. I'll be a kafir because I can't deal with people being anti-black. Can't deal with it. So many black Palestinians are not considered for jobs that require direct communication or interaction with customers. The majority of Palestinians do not marry black Palestinians, although recently there have been some changes in mentality. Where I live, people accept to marry black Palestinians, but in other areas, it is strictly forbidden. The Arabs make it a fact to strictly forbid their daughters, their sons in Palestine to marry the black. Keep it real, man. Does this sound like a people we should be siding with? I know a lot of black people want to side with the Palestinians because they're David going up against Goliath. And we see a lot of us in them. But we don't treat them like they treat us. When the Arabs come around us, when the Muslims come around us, do we call them racial slurs? Do we tell them to live in the slave quarters of our cities? If you go to Africa, the richest people in Tanzania, the richest people in Mombasa, Kenya, all the Arabs, all the light-skinned Muslims got big old houses, drive fancy cars in black countries. And how do black people live in Palestine? How do black people live in Jordan? How do black people live in Morocco? How do black people live in Libya? How do black people live in Tunisia? How do black people live in Egypt? Every part of the Arab world, you will find black ghettos. And they call them slaves to their face. And then on top of that, they call them words like darky, abid, zanj, all sorts of stuff right to their face. And then they talk about Islam and peace and no racism in Islam. Fuck out of here. We are not siding with Palestinians. We are not siding with Israelis. We will never side with anybody who's anti-black. Anybody who calls our people slaves, does blackface, discriminates against us, have their police beat us over the heads, ghettoize us, never will you have our support, at least from me. And I speak for me and any other black person who is with me. You can wave some Palestinian flags. Just wave that Palestinian flag while you watch blackface on Arab TV and they call our children monkeys. You can wave that Israeli flag. Just wave that Israeli flag when those Israeli police beat you over the head and throw you in jail with all the other Ethiopians. We're not rocking with any of that. I'm keeping it real on this channel. Anti-black racism and white supremacy is the devil, and it always needs to be fought, no matter who does it. Arab, Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, I don't care. I don't care. Anyway, let's keep building, man. It is worse for black Palestinian women. While dark-skinned men may be able to marry light-skinned Palestinians, the reverse is mostly not accepted. I knew a couple who were in love, but the father of the would-be groom threatened to renounce him in the newspapers. Sadly, they separated, he said. And Obayed says the security forces have been recently very harsh on black Palestinians. When the cops pulled him and his friends over recently, he was the only one from the passengers pulled out for further security checks. He took his anger out by writing a poem directed at the police entitled "Blacks Are Not Security Suspects." Despite the facing bouts of racism, he said he never thought about leaving Gaza until recently. The police treatment has gotten worse. So for the first time, I thought about leaving. But for Karama, a 35-year-old Palestinian woman who has a black father and a white mother, race has never gotten in the way of her success. I wonder why. She got that light skin privilege. She got that light skin privilege. Just keep it real. I personally haven't experienced any discrimination, she told Gulf News. Blacks are sometimes preferred by some organizations who seek diversity. Karama has participated and led many different social work initiatives and ceremonies, but she acknowledges that having a white mother could be the reason. Maybe, Karama, maybe you think so? You think so, Karama? I know in other areas of Gaza, people are not as accepting. There are plenty of black people in Gaza and in the West Bank dealing with all sorts of stuff that we, black people outside, have fought tooth and nail to get the white supremacists to put respect on our names and our families and our lineage. These people, I feel for them because they are our Jews. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck. The Jews said that they wanted to create Israel, to create a safe space for all the Jewish people around the world who were forced to leave Judaism, who were killed because they were Jews and that sort of thing. But let's keep it real. Black people, the black Arabs are our Jewish people. These people have been living under white supremacist, Arab supremacist domination, their minds distorted, being called slaves and abids and zanj all day and all night, seeing blackface done on TV, getting beaten and killed, told that they can't marry who they want to marry or be where they want to be or work the jobs that they want to work. They are our Jews. I'm going to keep it real. We need to do something to save the black Arabs in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Morocco, in Palestine, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Iraq, in Turkey. The black Jews are the black Arabs. Oh, the irony. Oh, the irony. Black people in Gaza constitute a minority of 1%. We already read that, and that's the end of the article. See, I told you nobody's going to like me in this live stream. Everybody got real quiet. I was talking real heavy on Israel. Oh, everybody was all up in the chat. But as soon as we start talking about Palestine, now where your nuts at, nigga? Where your nuts at, nigga? I thought we here to talk about black empowerment. I thought we were here to talk about fighting white supremacy. But when we talking about the Palestinians, now we all quiet now? I don't care. I don't care. No, I have no remorse. I have no remorse for anything I say here. And you, as black people, if you're watching this, you should be on the side of black empowerment. We're not taking any sides for people who don't respect us at all. I've done plenty of live streams talking about the blackface done in the Arab world, talking about the anti-black discrimination in the Arab world, and I meant to speak about how in Israel they were talking about kicking out all the Eritreans just because the Eritreans had a personal political fight amongst themselves. The Eritreans a few weeks ago were scrapping in the streets of Tel Aviv, and then Benjamin Netanyahu said, "Oh, we got to kick all the Eritreans out." I don't think he did that, but that's a sign of anti-black racism. Because if this was Ukrainians and Russians fighting in Israel, there wouldn't be any talk about deporting people. But let's keep it real, man. We are keeping it absolutely real. Let's go back to Israel again. Anti-black racism is a part of Israel's history. I'm sure this is going to get people riled up in the chat again. Oh yeah, let's pick on the Jews now. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Everybody's going to get back in here and start typing away. But let's keep it real, man. Israel's long history of anti-black racism. All the links for all the articles I will read will be in the comments section of the chat. Let's read this. Israel presents itself as a homeland for all Jews that welcomes and provides safe haven to all Jewish people. The ironically named Law of Return, passed on July 5th, 1950, declared that all Jewish people had the right to come to live in Israel. But does Israel actually accept all Jewish people? Of course, this law is inherently racist towards the Palestinian people whose land was stolen to create the state of Israel. And it is also clear that the Zionist political movement has a particular history of anti-black racism. This helps us understand not only the contradictions within pro-Israel ideology, but also the deep connections between the black struggle for freedom and the Palestinian struggle. Yes, indeed. Shout out to Tudo Rocket. He said, let's keep it real. And Tudo Rocket also said, no mercy. I love you, bro. Love you too, man, whoever you are. And yeah, let's keep on building. So, the Uganda scheme. At the Sixth Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1903, a proposal titled the Uganda scheme was put forward by the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl. Herzl had been approached the year before by the infamous imperialist and colonial secretary of Great Britain, Joseph Chamberlain. Chamberlain had a vested interest in the ongoing settlement of the African continent and the pillaging of the continent's resources. He once wrote, "It is not enough to occupy great spaces of the world's surface unless you can make the best of them. It is the duty of a landlord to develop his estate. When the white supremacists went to Africa and started dividing up the continent, dividing Kenya, dividing Tanzania, dividing Uganda and Rwanda, oh, they were ready to send settlers there. The white supremacists were working hand in hand with the Zionists to try to colonize Africa. Does that not sound racist to you? If that's not anti-black, I don't know what is. Let's continue. The British had already carved up most of the continent after the Berlin Conference of 1884, the meeting of imperial powers where they decided what lands they would occupy. Chamberlain had a special interest in East Africa, specifically the colonies of Kenya and Uganda. On a trip to Uganda, Chamberlain thought of Herzl and the budding Zionist movement while on the Uganda Railway. He said if Dr. Herzl were at all inclined to transfer his efforts to East Africa, there would be no difficulty in finding land suitable for Jewish settlers. He offered 5,000 square miles of land between Kenya and Uganda. Herzl was greatly interested in the idea of a Jewish homeland in Africa and presented it at the Sixth Zionist Congress. It was formally supported by the Congress but caused controversy amongst members. Chamberlain eventually rescinded the offer, but eventually the Zionist movement, with the essential assistance of imperialist powers, succeeded in setting up the state of Israel in Palestine. Israeli leaders worked for years alongside Britain and the United States to create a white supremacist colonial state. The Uganda scheme shows that Zionism, at its core, is about taking the lands of indigenous people in order to steal their resources. Facts, absolute facts. The white, and let's keep it real, guys. A lot of people might think, oh, the Zionists can't be white supremacists because they are Jews, and the white supremacists think that Jews are not white. Let's keep it real. The Jewish people, the Ashkenazi Jews, by and large, descend from Europe and are considered white people. If they are not white people, they are white passing, because Jonah Hill can play a wasp in any movie, like he did in the movie Wolf of Wall Street, right? So, yeah, we're not going to pretend like the Jewish people are not white people. Yes, they are. A lot of them are white people. Yes, you have Mizrahi Jews and, the brown skinned ones and, the ones who came from Morocco and different stuff like that. Yeah, there are Jews who are brown. There are Jews who are not white passing. But by and large, what we think of as Jewish people are white passing people, right? They're white with an asterisk. But that doesn't mean that they can't be white supremacists. And of course, the United States and Britain at the time were going to support any sort of colonial state as long as it had a white face. As long as white people were inflicting the colonialism, they didn't care if they were Jewish or Christian, whatever, right? So let's keep on building. Racism towards Ethiopian Jews. Racism is integral to Zionism. And we see this not just in the treatment of Palestinians, but also in how they treat Jewish people of African descent. The Zionist project is fundamentally about capitalism, settler colonialism of years, tracing its history to the ancient kingdoms of Aksum and the Ethiopian Empire. Many Ethiopian Jews immigrated to Israel in the late 20th century. Since arriving in Israel, many Ethiopian Jews have faced constant discrimination. Their faith was questioned by rabbis and their communities ostracized from the rest of Israeli society. In 1990, the National Israeli Blood Bank routinely destroyed blood donated by Ethiopian Israelis because they were afraid that Ethiopians carried HIV. There was a cap on the number of Ethiopian Jews entering Israel until relatively recently. Sad, sad. That's inherent anti Black racism. Talking about, oh, the Ethiopians have HIV, they're going to make our people sick. It's absolutely sad. Absolutely sad that that's happened. So, the minority status of the Ethiopian Jewish community continues poor material conditions. They have the highest poverty rate among the Jewish population in Israel and face the highest levels of police violence after Palestinians. Israel calls itself a bastion of human rights and progress while denying rights to both Palestinians and Ethiopian Jews. The treatment of Ethiopian Jews is completely different from the warm welcome offered to Jewish people from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, for instance. The anti Black racism is consistent and it doesn't stop with the Ethiopian Jewish community. It also affects Jews of African descent around the world. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can go on YouTube right now and find stories of other people talking about, they didn't let me go into the synagogue because they thought I wasn't Jewish and that sort of thing. Dark skinned, brown skinned Jews getting told that you're not Jewish enough, or, there's no way that you can be Jewish enough, that sort of thing. You must be a convert, stuff like that. And that happens in the Muslim community too. Happens in the Muslim community. You walk into a mosque in America, they see a Black person, oh, you must be a convert. Oh, you must have went to prison. Oh, you must have been out of the Nation of Islam and that sort of thing. I have more familiarity with that sort of context, but I'm pretty sure, in fact, I know that this happens to a lot of Black Jews across the world. Let's continue building. Israel's discrimination towards the Abba Abba, Abba Udea. I can pronounce that. For example, in Uganda, there is a community called the Abba Udea, which in Luganda means people of Judah. They practice both conservative and Orthodox Judaism. The law of return was meant to provide Jewish settlers from all over the world citizenship and a homeland on Palestinian land. However, this law of return does not apply to the Abba Udea. Even though this community keeps Jewish law by keeping kosher, observing the Sabbath, and converting according to Jewish religious doctrine, they are not able to access citizenship. Israel's interior ministry claims that the Ugandan Jewish community and their conversions are invalid because they were not part of a recognized or established Jewish community. Several attempts by the Abba Udea to be formally recognized have failed. Netanyahu has likened the Ugandan Jews seeking citizenship as outsiders. The law of return does not apply to Palestinians, nor does it apply to many non white Jewish people. Wow. The very existence of Israel relies on racist, settler colonial logic. Zionism privileges a select few while dehumanizing, discriminating, and killing others that are deemed lesser by white supremacist ideology. Black people around the world have been victims of settler colonialism, imperialism, and war. We have had our lands taken, our bodies dehumanized, and our communities decimated. Whether it's in the Congo, Ferguson, or Sheikh Jarrah, our struggles are the same. The struggles of Black people worldwide and that of the Palestinians are connected. We must connect Israel's history of anti-Black racism with its abhorrent history of occupation and genocide towards the Palestinian people as we fight for freedom. As we should. I absolutely agree. We have to connect that Israel inherently wanted to settle parts of Africa, steal parts of Africa from Black people. They don't recognize the Jewish people that are already in Uganda. They can never be Jews because this is a part of I'm white and I say so. The Jews be like, okay, you're a Jew, but you're not a Jew. Like they'll say, okay, everybody in Russia, by the way, all the people in Russia who left the Soviet Union after it collapsed, oh, they were scientists, doctors, engineers, people that could contribute to Israel, right? Oh, yeah, anybody who's white from Russia and says they're a Jew, yeah, you're a Jew. Come on in. Come on in. But any Black person from Uganda who actually practices the kosher laws and all the laws in the Torah, and they wear the little hats and all that sort of stuff. Oh yeah, y'all aren't Jewish. Y'all aren't Jewish. I'm sorry, you don't have the right culture. You're not the right cultural fit. The favorite line of white people when they want to deny Black people the opportunity. You're not the right cultural fit. Keep it real. Israel's been on some anti-black racism stuff. But guys, we are not off of Palestine's ass. We will stay on Palestine's ass all day. Let's go. This is the last article we're going to read for today. Last article here. Afro-Palestinians face double the harassment and double the racism. This is published on April 17th, 2022. Nisreen Salem is an Afro-Palestinian from Egypt who has been mocked due to her skin color and hair for most of her young life. This was written by Anjuman Rahman. And yeah, let's go into it. Nisreen Salem is an Afro-Palestinian from Egypt who has been mocked due to her skin color and hair for most of her young life. The 25-year-old is one of at least 400 Afro-Palestinians from Nigeria, Egypt, Chad, Senegal, and Sudan who live within the walls of occupied Jerusalem's Old City, adjacent to Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. The hardest part was when I started hating everything about myself because I was being pointed at and attacked verbally by both Palestinians and Jews everywhere I went, she told me. We face double the harassment and double the racism for being Palestinian and for being black. Mm, 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 mm. Israeli soldiers are always cursing the black Palestinians and interrogating them whenever they pass by. This is how most people in my community grow up. Working as a photojournalist on October 18th last year, Salem sent out to film the violent raids carried out by Israeli forces at the Damascus Gate into the old city they serves as a popular gathering spot for many Palestinians. The day sticks out in her memory, not for the raid itself, not for the tear gas and sound bomb attacks that followed, but for what happened to her afterwards. She was alone covering events as they unfolded when she was approached by several Israeli soldiers at a military checkpoint. They assaulted her following a brief interrogation. I was taking some videos for my work, and the Israeli soldiers know every journalist in Damascus Gate and Jerusalem, so they are quick to identify us during clashes. They know us all very well, even our names, which is why I believe that they had decided in advance that they were going to arrest me. During her arrest, the soldiers shouted racial abuse and racist abuse, including slave, and kicked and beat her until she was numb with fright and pain. Still visibly traumatized, she explained how they kicked her. Many of the soldiers were standing over me, and I was shocked. I froze because I didn't know what to do. During the investigation, they accused me of kicking the soldiers, even though that didn't happen. Then they wanted to know who I was working for and accused me again of sending photos and playing political games. Salem was detained for 13 hours following her interrogation. The biggest problem when you're in an Israeli jail is that you don't know what's happening outside. You don't know if it's morning or evening. It felt like time had stopped. The food which they gave me was unclean, and even though I was on my period, they banned me from the bathroom. It was the hardest 13 hours of my life. She is convinced that the purpose of the attack and interrogation was to deter her from documenting Israel's abuses against Palestinians. Among Palestinian journalists, she is far from alone in being attacked in this way. Journalism is a pillar of democracy that should be able to hold those in power to account. It comes as no surprise, therefore, that Israel takes extreme measures to block any accurate reporting of the rights violations and crimes committed by its security forces in the occupied Palestinian territories. This is our beautiful Palestinian melanated sister right here. There are many, many black people in Palestine and in the West Bank, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Israel, all over the Middle East. There are black people everywhere. We need to care for our brothers and sisters that are over there because they're living with some of the worst white supremacy in general. And even though this article that we're reading right now is talking about how this black woman was targeted by the Israeli forces because of her race and also her ethnicity as a Palestinian and her religion as a Muslim who obviously wears the hijab very well, we never should think, okay, all right, so the Israelis are racist. No, no, no. I'm pretty sure the Israelis knew that they could disrespect a black woman for her race because they see other Palestinians and other Arabs do it as well. Everybody there is codified on anti-black racism, the Israelis and the Palestinians. Let's keep on building though. So, I knew that risk involved. I knew the risks involved as a journalist. It is dangerous here, and Palestinian society is also judgmental about women becoming journalists. Females, we are told, should prioritize getting married and having children. However, women can balance both a career and a family. She came across the community's attitude towards women journalists after graduating from Birzeit University, north of Ramallah. Her mother, she said, is both scared for scared for and proud of her ambitions and achievements. I'm used to society making everything a problem for me, but I've learned to be very confident in my decisions and in myself. Growing up as a member of a racial minority, feelings of isolation and exclusion are all too common. Such feelings are shared by other Black Palestinians. Some of her earliest memories include racism from both Palestinians and Israelis. Playing outside as a child, she said children would point at her and ask her why her skin is so dark. She's black because of the sun, her mother would explain, or she's black because God put her in a very hot place. This had a very negative impact on her self confidence. It wasn't until I started reading books and learning about the history of Afro Palestinians that I started to gain in confidence and I learned to love myself and my culture. Over the years, though, she has noticed a change of attitude towards Afro Palestinians. There is more tolerance and less racism. Things are changing slowly. In the past, many Palestinian people didn't like to marry from our community just because we are black. They have this image stuck in their head that black people are slaves. Even our braids mean slavery to them. And so our people used to try to change their hair. This is a shame. This is a shame. This is a shame that this still is happening. And we have to remember, guys, in the Arab world, getting married is very, very serious. In the Arab world, is different than the West. Getting married in the Arab world is literally life or death for women, right? And it's a sign of pride and honor for men to be able to have a wife. And people there get married very young. And it's considered, taboo for a person to be unmarried for a very long time. So the fact that there are so few Afro Palestinians, and if they can't marry somebody of their own race or whatever, they are forced to go and be denigrated or dehuman dehumanized by white Palestinians and white Arabs and that sort of thing. This happens way too often, and this is sort of the choice that the black Arabs have to go through. And they are our Jews, and we need to protect them and bring them home. We need to get them back to safety because they are not safe. They are not mentally safe or physically safe around white Arabs who claim to be Muslim so much, and yet they still refer to black people as slaves, call them their neighborhoods as slave quarters and that sort of thing. It's a shame and an embarrassment. So the current generation of Afro Palestinians is different, she believes, because of the internet. We can browse and connect with others who look like us and appreciate our unique features. The internet helped me to love and accept myself and others who are very different from the majority. And I am able to share everything I learned with my friends and peers who are not familiar with the Black experience and history in Palestine. Her pursuit of journalism has inspired in part by this drive. Mainstream and social media news about Palestinians is filled with pictures of people with light skin and brown, even blonde and red hair. So when I posted on social media about myself, people were shocked. As a result, she concluded she intends to be the journalist who reports on and shows the diversity among Palestinians. This will include the Afro Palestinians until everyone knows about my community near Al Aqsa Mosque. And that is the last article we will read today. And I will end with this part of the story. So I mentioned earlier that I dated this beautiful woman right here. And this is a short on my channel. You can find it anytime. This Palestinian girl from Gaza. Her name was Riham. We broke up. Long story short, short story long. There are plenty of black people in Gaza. And before I met Riham, I actually did not know. I actually did not know. I was ignorant. I knew that there were a ton of black people in the Arab world because when I went to Tunisia and lived there for about 2 years, I was very shocked to find how many black people were there. Because when we think of the Arab world, we just think of light skinned, wheat colored people, that sort of thing, right? But there are tons of black people there, tons of black people in Egypt, in Palestine, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in Sudan. And, Sudan is a mostly black country, but you get the idea. You get the idea. There are tons of black Arabs, and the black Arabs face some of the worst racism in the world for black people to be going through in 2023. It's no different in Palestine, so they will not be our friends. We have to remember as black people, we have no friends in this world. We have no friends. The Jews will not save us. The Arabs will not save us. The Turks will not save us. No groups of Asians will save us. The Latin Americans will not save us. We have to be on code together to fight against white supremacy and anti-blackness. All we can do for the others is try to convince them that the problem that we know exists is a big problem and needs to be fought against. But we can't convince them of anything else. We can't do anything else with them because they are not fully committed to fighting white supremacy. The Palestinians are only committed to fighting for their liberation as a group of people, as they should be, and they can do it however means they see fit. But I don't want to see any black people throwing up Palestinian flags unless you are willing to turn on the TV, turn on YouTube, and look at blackface being done on Arab TV, and they all laugh and smile and they think it's okay. I don't want to see any black people throwing up the Israeli flag when our Ethiopian brothers and sisters in Israel are getting smacked over the head with batons, and they are threatening to expel them from from Israel, as they are talking about for the Eritreans who are in Israel and that sort of thing. I don't want to hear any black people caping for any group of people who have historically been anti-black. That's my opinion. Should black people care about Israel and Palestine's conflict? Hell no. Let the off-whites have their fight. I repeat, let the off-whites have their fight, because it is not our plight. What is our plight? It's fighting against white supremacy. So sisters like, what's her name? Nisreen. So sisters like Nisreen don't have to be told they're ugly or that they're a slave in the Middle East just because they're black. So the Ethiopian Jews don't have to fight to just be considered Jewish enough. That is our plight. Our plight is to be respected as people. The Palestinians are not fighting to end anti-black racism. The Israelis did not create Israel to be a state that's anti-racist. We are on our own, and that is all. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. So this is a very long live stream. We were in here real heavy, real heavy. I might have gotten very hot in here, but I want to say thank you to everybody who showed up in the chat. Tudo Rocket, Saeed, Greg Mack, Private C, World Traveler, The Black Mine, TVSX, and EU. I hope y'all found this content informative, engaging, entertaining, everything like that. Shout out to everybody. If you agree with me, I appreciate it. If you disagree with me, leave a comment. Let's construct, like black men, like the kings we are, or like the black queens we are. If you're a woman, let's have a constructive dialogue. But I think the point has been made. In all situations, in both sides, they have displayed anti-black racism. And we don't have any friends who are anti-black. Period. Period. Thank you for watching. We'll be live streaming tomorrow. We'll be trying to live stream as much as we can. I want to say shout out to all my new subscribers, and peace.